Hello and welcome everyone to a video that's basically begging to be smothered by the algorithm, as I finally try that whole branching out content-wise thing I mentioned like a year and a half ago. And what better way to branch out than by ripping off yet another content creator, two this time. Now for the record, I did actually seek out Yin Yang Sage's video when this idea first popped in my head because I was curious if anyone else had actually had this idea. And I'm not gonna lie, my heart sank a little when I saw that, yes, this had been done before. But then I saw that he only covered the first episode and I was like, man, I'm way more autistic than this guy. But to be completely serious, I totally get why he wouldn't want to produce something going over the entire series. The guy was probably just gauging interest and decided that it wasn't worth it to continue doing more of it. Not everyone is willing to drop everything to work on something that might not bring in views. It just so happens that I do this channel because I like to hear myself talk. No, but really, I just wanted to shout him out for being the first to think about this. I honestly love Deadman Wonderland, and I'm really happy that anyone else is just talking about it at this point. To date, it's probably in my top 10 anime and is the only manga I've gone out of my way to obtain physical copies of. Now, for those unfamiliar, Deadman Wonderland is a series about a Japanese middle schooler named Ganta Igarashi. After one day, his friends and classmates are killed by the mysterious Red Man, who leaves Ganta with a crystal in his chest before disappearing. Ganta is then framed for the massacre and sent to the prison amusement park hybrid Deadman Wonderland, where he quickly learns to adapt and survive, and along the way meets several others with their own goals, including a mysterious albino girl named Shiro, who seems to know and care a great deal about him. As for what I actually have to compare here, it's really simple. The anime adapts volumes 1 through 5 and chapters 1 through 21 of the manga, so I'm just gonna ignore anything past that. Along with the Senji OVA, which has no manga counterpart. Now just a little disclaimer, I won't be pointing out if a scene has moved slightly forward or backwards, unless there's something else there to touch on. And finally, I'm gonna be using the dub for this because despite dedicating an entire video on the subject, I'm not a fucking weeaboo. So if there's anything that was added or taken away in the dubbing, I'm not aware of that. I don't speak Japanese. Now let's get into this and see just how accurate this anime was. The very first difference is fittingly found in the very first shot. In the manga, the first 3 pages are child Ganta and Shiro playing while Sorei plays piano, the Wretched Egg going on a rampage, and a collection of shots from the Red Hole earthquake. In the anime, it jumps right to the shot of Ganta's school. While I don't think the opening suffers from these missing panels, it would have been nice to see them, especially considering that episode 1 is almost entirely comprised of chapter 1 of the manga. In the manga, Ganta explains that he puts a log symbol on his things as a way to show that it will forget and take things like sweets if he doesn't. In the anime, Ganta's log symbol is shown but never directly referenced. Now, I'll be coming back to this in a little bit, but the omission of this line, as well as ones added by Yamakatsu and Mimi's father, actually has a pretty interesting implication. In this same scene, the Red Hole is mentioned and explained as an earthquake that sank 70% of Tokyo, even having a full page dedicated to it. In the anime, the Red Hole is mentioned but never explained. This is probably because it's not exactly easy to have a couple of teenagers spout exposition about an event they're all familiar with, without it sounding forced. Having Machina explain in Deadman Wonderland's history was definitely the right way to go. The events after the massacre are slightly different in the anime. Firstly, Yamakatsu's death in the manga is represented by a bloodied soccer ball that he brought into the classroom, and in the anime they gave him a watch so that we can tell which particular severed arm belonged to him. And secondly, the Wretched Egg doesn't throw Mimi's head at Ganta. In fact, not a lot of attention is given to Mimi like in the anime compared to the class as a whole. In the manga, the Wretched Egg just throws her head to the side, which honestly I can't tell is more or less brutal than the anime. Now don't get me wrong, throwing the head of someone's severed head at their friend is brutal, but throwing their head to the side like it's just an empty can you can't be bothered to find a bin for goes to show how cold and uncaring this killer is just as much. Either way, as a whole, I think the anime improved this scene. In the manga, the whole courtroom scene doesn't happen. It shows Ganta being given the death penalty, as well as his reaction that it smash cuts to Deadman Wonderland. In the anime, Ganta tries to fight back, being shocked that anyone could think he murdered his friends before being jumped by a group of men, including Mimi's father. Now, as for that thing I brought up before, Mimi's father has an interesting line about treating Ganta like his flesh and blood for the better part of 10 years.
I treated you like my flesh and blood for the better part of 10 years!
Now, this line, along with Yamakatsu's added line about Ganta letting him sleep in, along with the omission of Ganta talking about his dad, paints an interesting picture. Firstly, why would Ganta be in a position as to where he could wake up Yamakatsu? And Mimi mentions that they've all had the same argument the day before, so this is a recurring thing. Basically, what I'm getting at here is that I think in the anime continuity, Mimi's father adopted Ganta and Yamakatsu after the Red Hole. After all, Ganta never mentions his father, and apparently he and Yamakatsu are responsible for waking each other up. so it's not a stretch to say that they might be sleeping in the same house. Now, I might just be looking too far into this, as there could be plenty of explanations, but from the picture the anime painted, I choose to believe this is the case. In the manga, the faked video isn't shown or even referenced as evidence as for why Ganta couldn't attempt an appeal. Also, Tamaki doesn't appear in the court scene in the manga. As a whole, I love the courtroom scene. While the smash cut in the manga shows how sudden everything must be feeling for Ganta, the anime paints a very clear picture of how dire and utterly hopeless Ganta's situation is. And once again, I honestly just prefer the anime to this scene. Now, even if you've read the manga, you actually might know this one if you somehow manage to skip the opening colored pages, but Shiro's suit isn't actually white in the manga. It's more of a cream color, which helps separate it from her skin. Now, while I once again prefer the anime, as white on red looks better than cream on red, this apparently had the unintentional effect of making people think Shiro was naked, which I don't get. I was 14 when I first saw this show, and I could tell she was wearing clothes. That's peak horny years, and I didn't see it that way, so I don't know what's wrong with you motherfuckers. In the anime, Makina calls out Ganta by name, causing the other prisoners to notice him. In the manga, she just goes over the standard greeting. The other prisoners just happen to notice him because of the wide coverage of his case. In the manga, Shiro first ambushes Ganta in his cell, not the construction yard, and instead of using a rebar pole, she uses a shard of glass. Aside from that, the scene is pretty much the same. They probably just combined this scene with the next one to save time without needing to randomly change scenery, when both of our protagonists will be there anyway. And finally, for the first episode, in the manga, the goons picking on Ganta in the construction yard manage to escape the falling rubble. Meanwhile, in the anime version of this scene, has them die, and even uses completely different characters. Oh boy, this is a big one. In the manga, Ganta meets a woman named Azami Mito, a major character who is entirely missing from the anime. She has several important scenes that are cut entirely or her role is taken up by Yo Takumi. Her first scene where she meets Ganta and explains cast points to him is largely excised from the anime, except for the cast point explanation, which is rolled into the infirmary scene with Yo. In the manga, this same scene is used to introduce Kazumasa Kosuji. His introduction in the anime is largely the same, just in the locker room scene, and the manga gives him more scenes showing his cruelty and impossible to follow rule set. Finally, in the manga, the goons from the construction yard returned and are revealed to be Kozuji's lapdogs and even recognize Ganta. In the anime, their first appearances are with Kozuji in the locker room. In the manga, Ganta goes to the infirmary because Kozuji has punched him in the face. In the anime, this is Ganta's next scene following his first branch of sin use. The doctor in the manga is a random old man. However, in the anime, the doctor is the same doctor who worked with Tamaki on the Deadman, both experimenting on them and dealing out the penalty game punishments. In the manga, Azami is the one to try and participate in the dog race and is called to Ganta for his earlier cowardice. She then has her arm broken by Kozuji after standing up to him. In the anime, Yo takes her role but is much friendlier to Ganta and is seemingly picked at random by Kozuji simply for being near Ganta to make a point that he'd crush anyone in his way. The manga has Ganta stand up to Kozuji much earlier in the locker room scene after he tries to get the teen to step on Azami, and he nearly beats Ganta for this until some guards step in. In the anime, however, this scene mostly plays out like the earlier cafeteria scene with Ganta bending the knee. However, the anime actually adds a scene where he almost attacks Shiro because she reminded him of the celebrity he assaulted. This is stopped personally by Makina, who goes as far as to cut his clothes apart, ruining that sweet-ass coat. The dog race is mostly the same between the two versions, but some scenes are changed or added in the anime. In the manga, there are a pair of scenes that don't appear at all in the anime where Kozuji threatens his goons while ordering them to kill Ganta. It's also much more obvious that Shiro's protecting him in the manga. Now, to be fair, the anime actually adds more than it leaves out, as the bungee cord drop, Kozuji using his goons as human shields, and Ganta and Shiro's brief talk are all anime exclusive. Though, to be fair, that last one is lifted from an earlier scene in the manga. And finally, there's a scene in the manga where Shiro rides a bull, knocking out several people, which the anime references, but with a mascot instead. In the manga, about 10 people make it to the last event of the dog race, 2 of which immediately fall into the spike pit and die. It's here where Kozuji gets rid of his goons for fucking up for the 3rd time in the race, and Ganta manages to stay away from the other contestants on his own. Kozuji falls and throws a knife, but Shiro blocks it with her knife like a real one. In the anime, it's only Kozuji, Ganta, and Shiro. The scene in the manga where Ganta stood up to Kozuji in the locker room is used here after being cornered, and while I get why it was placed where it was in the manga, I feel its placement is more cathartic as one big fuck you to Deadman Wonderland. Oh, also that final knife throw is cut. In the manga, Kozuji and his goons actually survive falling into the pit of spikes. However, Makina has seen what they attempted to do and puts them all into solitary confinement for a year. In the anime, Kozuji is killed when he falls into the spikes and his crew were dead before that point. Considering the next time we see them is a cameo during the prison's evacuation much later into the manga, I once again prefer the anime's version of their fates, but the manga dog race is more interesting in my opinion. Finally, the manga has a scene where after some dude fails to pay back Yo, he rips off his ear as interest by selling the guy's earring for cast points. Like, holy shit, where was this guy in the anime? In the anime, Tamaki refers to the director of Deadman Wonderland as Daddy, and is in fact his son, a plot point that isn't present in the manga, but another I personally really like. In the manga, Tamaki receives the news of the wretched egg escaping during a meeting, while in the anime, it doesn't happen until later while he's playing with his toys. In the anime, Yo's arm is still recovering from being broken by Kozuchi. In the manga, this was Azami, so Yo is unharmed. In the manga, after Ganta shoots the wretched egg, she actually talks to Ganta, which, considering she's Shiro's alternate personality, begs the question, why does Ganta still call her the Red Man? And how does he not put 2 and 2 together since the wretched egg should sound just like Shiro? Does that mask have some bullshit Arcanine voice changer, or is Shiro secretly a very talented voice actor? Either way, the point is this is cut from the anime likely to avoid spoiling the twist for non-manga readers. In the manga, the old man doctor makes a brief appearance once again, telling Ganta to shut up and quit being a pussy. In the anime, Shiro takes just a bit more convincing to not let her and her best friend get murdered by a killer robot. And honestly, I agree, Ganta deserved it. Talk shit, get hit. In the manga, Senji has a couple of lines about explosions which are cut from the anime. While heavily implied in the manga, the anime outright confirms that Senji is the man who is said to have fought the Necromacro by having him talk to the robot and say that he had been waiting for another chance to fight it. During this same scene, Senji specifically breaks out and destroys the Necromacro because he wanted to fight Ganta, and mainly destroy the robot so that he wouldn't be denied a good fight, and is the one to challenge Ganta. In the anime, however, this is completely changed as Senji comes looking for the Necromacro, and it's only after he destroyed it that Ganta attacks, causing Senji to realize that he's there at all and only attacks because Ganta acted aggressively. In the anime, Ganta is far more disgusted by the Carnival Corpse promo, screaming and begging for it to stop. While in the manga, he's more disturbed by the revelation that they harvest body parts from dead men. During a brief scene in the anime Carnival Corpse promo, we see a dead man getting set on fire, which is probably a nod to the manga-only character, Hitara, whose branch of Zen lets him set things and people on fire, as well as a spike that stabs into someone before creating more, a nod to another manga-only character, Choplin. There's also one more anime-only scene teasing Mockingbird for about 5 seconds. The early fight in the anime is extended by Ganta shooting extra bullets, which Senji manages to block all of. Good job wasting that shit, Ganta, you kinda needed that blood. Everyone's favorite manga-only character makes another appearance at this point, sporting a cast that Anime Yo has just decided that he didn't need anymore. Yo and Shiro come to her after overhearing her talk about an event that could lead to G-Block, and when Shiro tells her how she's gonna save Ganta, Azumi agrees to show them, wanting to help Ganta after he stood up to Kozuchi for her. In the anime, Yo and Shiro just happen to find the right vent. I don't know how they managed to find it while sneaking around a restricted area, but I'm choosing to believe that a cardboard box was involved at one point. In the manga, Ganta is visited by a group of friendly dead men after his match. In the anime, he's left alone after the fact. Oh joy, another big one. Where do I start? Two of the characters he meets here are Choplin and Hitara, manga-exclusive characters that do not make an appearance in the anime outside of possible cameos in episode 4. And the other two characters, Minatsuki and Masu, don't appear a little later in the anime, leaving Ganta to watch Senji's penalty game alone, which is honestly a shame. Not only is Choplin a treat whenever she's around, but it really sets in the horrific terror that what Ganta is going through is just part of everyday life in G-Block, to the point that most characters aren't even fazed by this shit anymore. In the anime, there's a quick scene after Shiro passes out showing the Trin's retriever. In the manga, we don't even see her pass out, she's just with the director next time. Okay, so I was hoping that the anime would just throw some random big numbers to show that Yo had a lot of cast points so I could seem a bit more perceptive, but no, the amount of cast is exactly the same in both versions. I just wanted to point this out so you guys knew I was doing my due diligence here. In the anime, Ganta meets Minatsuki for the first time by saving her flowers from Masu. Now, in the manga, it's established that she knows where Ganta's room is, so her planning just makes more sense, but in the anime, I guess she tracked him down by his prison ID number, because unless she has someone feeding her information, that's the only way I can think that she'd be able to find him. In the anime, Minatsuki has more scars and the placement of similar ones have changed. What? Oh, don't give me that look! The anime took Yo's cast joint straight out of the manga. I'm allowed to be anal about this. In the anime, Minatsuki tells Ganta that while her father was beating her, she used her branch of sin to kill him in self-defense. In the manga, the story she tells him is much closer to what the anime says really happened, where she killed him before Yo was able to. The manga also shows more of their home life, with Yo standing up for and attacking his father for the abuse he thinks Minatsuki is going through. In the manga, we're explicitly shown Minatsuki pull her earring out before the pipes fall onto Ganta. In the anime, this is hidden by the shot cutting to the other side of her head, probably done to make the reveal in a few minutes more shocking. In the manga, the Carnival Corpse arena is a boxing ring, and the fight is even set up like one, being separated into 3 3-minute rounds. In the anime, it's just the same arena in the Senji fight, just with the debris cleared, and they even go as far as to show the repaired speaker that Ganta had dropped on Senji.
Okay, I hope you like these siblings because the anime actually makes a set of changes that changes a big part of their dynamic. In the manga, Minatsuki says her mother pushed her away to save herself in the Red Hole earthquake. She then finds her body and just walks away. In the anime, however, the betrayal is even more heart-wrenching as Minatsuki's mother does have time to save her daughter. She simply chooses not to instead of grabbing a pot of primroses and is crushed by debris outside of the greenhouse. Also in the anime, Yo is the one that rescues Minatsuki from under some rubble, whereas manga Minatsuki just finds Yo and her dad later. Now, this is one I have mixed feeling on, as the anime seems to heavily downplay Minatsuki killing her father. Now, in the manga, Yo makes it entirely clear that he knows that Minatsuki was faking her abuse, and even lists off examples of her hurting and possibly killing people before her father. In the anime, none of this is brought up, and Yo even says that their father deserved it. And I actually have another theory as to why this is, and it revolves around one scene where Yo finds Minatsuki naked with her father. Now, this scene appears in both versions, so it's safe to say that it really happened, right? Well, not really. Well, this certainly happened in the anime, as Yo is talking to Minatsuki about an event they were both present for, so it would be pretty hard to lie about, considering she'd remember it just as well as him, but in the manga, it's not Yo who tells this story to Minatsuki. It's Minatsuki telling it to Ganta, which throws the entire validity of the story up into the sky, as we know for a fact she was lying to him for sympathy. Also in the manga, Yo explicitly says that their father never did anything to her. Not that he didn't beat her, but that he never did anything. Now, if he had walked in on his dad stripping her down, why would he say this? Well, I think the answer is that it simply didn't happen in the manga. But when making the anime, they decided to make this event real, which explains why his death would be justifiable, as Minatsuki's past isn't explored as much, and there's one minor difference I didn't bring up before. That's that in the anime version, Minatsuki is completely naked and is bleeding from a head wound, whereas she's fine and still wearing some clothes in the manga version, which seems to imply that in the anime continuity, Minatsuki was really abused by her father to some extent, which, along with the changes to her mom, makes the anime version of Minatsuki a lot more sympathetic. All of this leading into Yo and Minatsuki themselves. While these changes don't have a massive impact on their dynamic or characterization, it does recontextualize their motives and even a good part of their relationship. In the manga, Minatsuki is someone who let a single traumatic event define her entire life. She saw the worst of humanity in her mother when she needed her the most and decided that deep down, everyone must be like that. So why wait for someone to drop the act on her when she could become far worse than they could ever hope to be? Meanwhile, in the anime, she comes across as less malicious and more broken. Her mom and dad both hurt her in ways no child ever should be by a parent, and because of this, she refuses to trust anyone. Even her brother, who put his entire life to the side to help her. And because of this, she lashes out, hurting anyone and everyone she meets. Even her sadism is more prevalent in the anime, which makes sense in this context, as it would be more about gaining a sense of power that she had ripped from her, whereas in the manga, she just wanted to see someone hurt. Anime Yo is also painted in a more sympathetic light because of this, as he seems unaware of just how far his sister has gone, and her actions are justifiable enough to where he can excuse them and seems to genuinely think that Minatsuki is redeemable deep down. After all, he saved her life once, why not again? In the manga, however, Yo knows damn well that Minatsuki is a monster. He has the evidence linking her to multiple acts of pointless cruelty and a slain father who he knows for a fact did nothing wrong. He simply doesn't care. He quite frankly loves her too much. So much that it doesn't matter who he needs to step on, he's going to do everything he can to protect her regardless because it's his responsibility to do so. I'm actually torn as to which portrayal I like more. The anime makes it easier to relate to them, but I really like how the manga just flat out makes it clear that these are both really shitty people who have no one else but each other at this point. Okay, now that my thinly veiled character analysis is over, let's get on to more changes. Like how in the manga, when telling Ganta to keep quiet, to Yo, Minatsuki digs her fingers into his wounds, something that is cut from the anime, where she instead just covers his mouth. In the manga, Senji shows up to give Ganta a prep talk and gives him advice on how to fight Minatsuki's branch of sin. In the anime, they don't meet again until later, and Ganta gets the idea to ricochet his shots on his own. In the manga, when the director is talking to a sleeping Shiro, the twins are there while they're missing in the anime version. In the anime, we see an extended fight between the wretched egg and the director, whereas we only get this teased in the manga. In the manga, Senji has Ganta buy him some ramen, and they talk about the match in the Ganta gun. In the anime, this is rolled into the scene where Minatsuki kicks Yo in the dick for obviously trying to perv on her. Do I really need to talk about this one? Okay, fine. The anime adds in a scene where they do the worst comedic trope in anime, where Ganta accidentally sees Minatsuki in a state of undress, and she attacks him because of this, but hits Senji instead. This only works here because Minatsuki is already canonically a shitty person. In the manga, Choplin sneaks into Ganta's room while he's asleep yet again, and ends up reminding him that Minatsuki has a penalty game, whereas in the anime, he just remembers on his own. In the anime, when Karako knocks Ganta out, it's with a single punch to the chest. In the manga, he stays up long enough to dodge a couple of hits, but is still knocked out by a kick to the head. In the manga, Karako doesn't bring him to Scar Chain hideout while he's unconscious, instead bringing him to a laundry room, making her and Nagi seem like they have a bit more common sense. In the manga, Nagi tells Ganta that they're gonna save Minatsuki before the penalty game even starts. In the anime, they just have him sit and wait until Hair comes on the roulette wheel. Kind of a dick move, anime Nagi. In the manga, Genkaku takes the breaking of his guitar pretty badly, almost breaking down over it in tears. In the anime, he shows his true psychopathic nature by brushing off the loss of such a sweet-ass weapon. And that's actually it for this episode. The rest is literally ripped straight from the manga. In the manga, Karako punches the Necromacro through the bridge, shattering it. In the anime, she punches it so hard it explodes. The anime also adds a shot where the recently returned Todo watches Karako fall. The anime also omits a one-page scene where Yo wakes up and wants to warn Ganta about Worm Eater. Honestly, this gets explained later on again in the manga, so I see why this was cut. The anime extends the fight scene between Nagi and Hibana, during which Hibana kicks his shit in. In the anime, they extend the scene where Hibana is taking chunks out of Nagi's flesh, and as a result, Nagi ends up losing a lot more flesh. The anime also doesn't include a panel where Hibana straight up takes a bite out of Nagi's severed flesh. Considering Japan's stance on body mutilation, it's easy to see why they chose not to include this. In the anime, this bartender Deadman is given a blade under his prosthetic arm, which is honestly pretty dope considering in the manga it's just a normal sword. In the manga, it's Shiro who receives the message from Nagi about the ship being a bomb, whereas in the anime, it's Todo who passes this message on to Shiro. In the manga, we're given a brief shot of the man who would receive Scar Chain's data chip and give it to the public, a shot that doesn't appear in the anime. In the anime, the scene where Genkaku confronts Ganta is extended, and Genkaku tells Ganta about a weirdly morbid cut ending for the children's show Ace Man. In the manga, when Scar Chain is discussing who to bring in, they bring up Choplin once again, as she's never mentioned in the anime. This obviously doesn't happen, but Minatsuki and 2 other Deadmen are used as possible candidates. In the anime, Rokuro reveals that he was the one that put together the video from the courtroom scene in episode 1. In the manga, the video was never mentioned, so obviously Rokuro doesn't bring it up. In the anime, when explaining the backstory of Missouri and Dokuku, Rokuro mentions that they were captured together and were friends. However, in the manga, they just happen to be working together as Undertakers. In the manga, Todo makes his first appearance meeting Shiro where she would meet with the director. However, in the anime, she had already had a couple of short appearances. The anime cuts out a scene where Yo comes to warn Ganta about Worm Eater. This scene is mostly played for laughs, but Minatsuki and Yo do actually give Ganta some helpful advice in breaking the sound barrier. The scene is instead replaced by a scene that happens later in the manga where Todo instead steals Crow's Branch of Sin. It's a bit different in the manga, but mostly unchanged besides the fact that Shiro isn't present here. In the anime, Ganta's supersonic bullet breaks the mirror of the room and is generally more impressive. In the manga, Senji still manages to deflect it. The anime adds a scene where when Ganta is going to the Undertaker HQ, Minatsuki ends up saving him from a squad of Undertaker and points him in the right direction as thanks for saving her during the penalty round. In the manga, Ganta meets up with the remaining members of Scar Chain to save Karako and Shiro. However, in the anime, most of them are killed and the ones who all live were the ones who worked on escaping, leaving Ganta as the only one who shows up. In the anime, Hibana breaks Shiro's legs because she tried to run up to Ganta who was fighting for her and Karako. In the manga, she just breaks him out of nowhere, probably for destroying that sweet-ass guitar earlier. Okay, so I'm only going to count this once, but basically the entire fight is different due to the extra members on Scar Chain's side. In the manga, Nagi kills a member of Scar Chain by breaking their neck. In the anime, this character is killed by fighting Undertakers in the hallway. The anime adds a scene where when Nagi is killing the Undertakers, Hibana tries to get Genkaku to reconsider killing all of their men, but the monk is too busy lusting over the carnage being caused. In the manga, she goes along with this until being shot by Genkaku. In the manga, Genkaku kills a member of Scar Chain by shooting off his limbs and then his head, and yet another by blowing his chest apart. In the anime, Hibana is killed when Todo pulls out his version of Invisible Black, which he stole from Senji. In the manga, we don't see what branch of Sin he uses. In the anime, Shiro briefly switches over to her Wretched Egg personality right before Ganta fires his enhanced Ganta gun and defeats Genkaku. In the manga, Genkaku is later shown to have survived the shot, though it's said he's in a coma and in critical condition. In the manga, we're shown that the same contact that had been waiting for Scarred Chain has been given a new data chip. The anime, once again, doesn't show this character at all. The anime has Makina directly confront Tamaki about Ganta and Yo's sudden reappearance at the end of the anime and plans to interrogate them. Tamaki doesn't really seem to care, not because he knows that didn't happen in the manga, so nothing's gonna come of it. In the anime, a new scene is shown with Ganta and Shiro, where Shiro sings the lullaby song to Ganta, which Ganta recognizes from his school massacre. This scene ends the anime and is the last difference between the versions. Well, that was something. Okay, so the Deadman Wonderland anime is, for the most part, a faithful recreation of the manga, with most changes being relatively small. The biggest change was the removal of Azami, who is a major character in the manga, and while it would be possible that she could be introduced in a second season, not anymore. Her removal in general is a huge shock and makes me wonder if a second season was ever actually planned at all. Aside from Azami, there's also Choplin and Hitara, and while you could honestly remove these two from the plot and it wouldn't change, their presence was certainly missed by me. Alright, so that does it for my little experiment. This is the first time I'm doing anything like this, and I think I kind of turned this into a different kind of video during the episode 6 segment, so sorry if I wasted your time on that. Like I said, I just really like this series. Now, I'm planning to do at least a couple of other videos like this, but I'm not sure on what. I'm currently considering Under the Red Hood, but I'm not sure. Who knows, maybe I'll throw an entire month or two of my life away and do a Persona 3 comparison of the game and anime. Either way, for now, I think I've wasted enough time on this. Like, no joke, I was in the middle of writing the script for Juliet vs. Travis, and then this video idea just jumped into my head and I said fuck it. So I should probably get back to that. If by chance this is my first video you came across, consider checking out my Versus series where I put two characters against each other to see who would win in a fight. If you need a bit more of a push, I've even used Deadman Wonderland characters a couple of times. But no pressure, I understand it's not everyone's cup of tea. Right, with all that, I've been Rain932 and I will see you next time.